Author of Hidden History, Crimes and Cover-Ups in American Politics, 1776 to 1963, and Survival of the Richest, Donald Jeffries separates the real from the unreal. Fact from fiction. Fact from fiction. Reverse engineering our manufactured reality. And now, from just outside the swamp-infested Washington, D.C., this is I Protest with Donald Jeffries.
And welcome to I Protest. It's Donald Jeffries coming to you, as the man says, from just outside the swamp-infested Washington, D.C., as we do every Friday from 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern on these same fine platforms. Special guest today, one of my favorites, fan favorite, and we have, as an added bonus, we finally get her on video. So she actually does exist. She's not just a detached voice from somewhere. Meghan Walsh, it's great to have you back. Most people know her. I hate to introduce somebody as being related to somebody, but most people know you from being the daughter of John Walsh of America's Most Wanted fame, and the sister of Adam Walsh, who was probably what kickstarted the entire missing and exploited children thing, and just Amber Alerts and all that stuff. I think pretty much began with him. So this subject very well, and we're going to talk more about what was really probably of all the things I write about and talk about, the child sex stuff is the darkest element of it and most disturbing, but you can't avoid it. So welcome back to the show, Meghan.
Thank you, Don. Thanks for having me. It's great to be back and finally show my face. Yes, I'm not running around and crazy this time. So, it's good to be back, and I want to thank everyone for joining us and being back to see what I have to say this time. So, I thought that this show we would, like I said before, kind of make it more of a conversation back and forth, but you touched on it, Don, the child, especially sex issue, but larger the issue of child protection and safety, right? And that falls under it. As we're learning today, there's many ways to traffic children, not just sex trafficking. Yes, that's huge, and the majority of it and part of it, right? It's not just one way for most of these kids. That's why the child trafficking trade is now larger than even the drug or arms trade. You can resell a child over and over again, including, after they're no longer alive, unfortunately. So we all are learning some wild things over the past few years, and especially, recently. And it reaches wide. But I wanted to today talk about kind of the history and how we got to where we are today. We all get called conspiracy theorists and stuff, but there is something to be said for history and researching and understanding kind of the environments and the lifestyles and conditions and things that led to where we are today. And so in dealing with the child issue and safety issue, of course, would bring up, the Finders cult, right? The Finders cult, the Franklin scandal, McMartin preschool, even going into Presidio and Dutroux, all of that. So as you said, with my brother's unfortunate disappearance in 1981 from the Sears department store in Hollywood, Florida, where it was said 2 weeks later that only his head was found, his remains were found in Vero Beach, Florida, outside of Vero Beach, Florida, which is Indian River County. We look at Florida, for this. We know that the Finders were arrested in Jacksonville. Their trial was in Tallahassee. A lot of this is based out of Florida, and that's where my parents started. So when we have Adam and we see through this child safety and protection issue come about in society, and this initiative be started, right, mainly and namely through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in 1983, which was actually signed, it was put into action, created by Congress. It's not a, grassroots, kind of thing that, yes, they take cases that are from the real people are they from real people, I should say. And they put them out to, to pass a law or to get an act or different things like that done. But really how that started, as well as funding behind this issue, was with the National Center for Missing Exploited Children. It put it in that nonprofit NGO realm, again being created by Congress, though, under Senator Byrd, which Kathy O'Brien, if for those that are familiar with her and her amazing work, she speaks out a lot about that, as well as the things that happened to her by Reagan and Senator Byrd and all of that. So I encourage everyone to look into that. So that's really where I wanted to start today, and to talk about, why has this issue grown, over 600%, to date from the beginning of its, of it being said it was to stop this issue, right, essentially. And, what is the National Center for Missing Exploited Children? What is the International Center for Missing Exploited Children? What are these other nonprofits that have come about since then, like Thorn, or in Belgium, we have Child Focus, which actually was created on a false case about the gentleman's daughter, and it actually was proven to be child trafficking. And that we have common denominator players within as well, like Ernie Allen, who is one of the founders with my father, and Jeff Koons, the pop artist. So this goes into, we see here when we look at this overall, and it is a big picture, so we're only going to be able to touch on, certain stuff today. But when we look at this, we do see how it goes into politics, media, news, celebrity, elites, all of that, and how this racket that everyone's demanding an Epstein list really is pretty much in our face already. We don't need a list of people to be released to really see who is spearheading what has been put into place and who's still involved in it, and as well as how this is affecting, it's destroying American families today. Through CPS and the data that National Center and all of these copycat or shell organizations that they have started, underneath and since the inception of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So that's really what we're looking at to date.
Well, and you're obviously you're at the heart of that, where you were involved in the family, and I don't know if the kids would have been on milk cartons. I mean, that was a big deal throughout the 80s, I guess, and into the 90s. I mean, everybody remembers, getting a milk carton with a little kid on it. And I remember the TV show Erie, Indiana, which was a very cute little show. It was only on for a couple years. It did an episode about that where where they twisted the kids on the milk carton. But I get the sense that before all this happened, that you didn't have. I don't know what CPS's function was back then, but they certainly don't seem to have been as powerful. They certainly weren't interfering as much as they did after that. And you can see we had Foggy Trail was talking about Johnny Gotch's mom's in. I don't know if you know about that, but of course that has been associated with Jeff Gannon or Jeffrey Guckert, the guy that was the male prostitute that was somehow in the Bush White House, 100 times or something, staying overnight. And his mother, I've tried to get her on the show. She doesn't. I have had Kathy O'Brien on the show that you mentioned about. Fascinating. And Kathy, of course, talked about playing the most dangerous game. Where they were shooting, they were going at you, and Dick Cheney, who later would injure the guy in the shooting, he was supposedly one of the dangerous game hunters. So this stuff almost doesn't seem real, but you're right in the middle of it. So I wonder, I was thinking about you too. I had to have you back on, but I lately in the news, Joe Biden has been overdoing himself with his creepy, inappropriate touching and behavior with children. If you saw, it looked like he was going to eat this little baby in Finland. I don't know if you saw that, where he walked up and he started nibbling and sniffing. And it's like, I don't know when you see that, I mean, can that even be real? I almost think at this point it's some kind of gimmick they're doing with him or something, because he can't. I mean, imagine how perverted he would be behind closed doors if he can't control himself like that on camera with strange babies.
I agree, Don, and I think that we're seeing it more and more. I think it's also energetic. I think a lot of people don't think about the fact that, I know especially my parents, having taken my children, they'd always say, which we all take off the cuff, but it's, oh, the children keep us young, right? The children keep us young. And that might have more meaning than we thought it did, to be honest. So, and there is something that's not a kooky thing. I mean, children are pure and they're full of life and they're untouched. And, that's an essence that we all love and are drawn to about children. And then when you put it in the context of a predator or a pedophile who has a love for children sexually or otherwise, that's not, normal, then we see things like this. And I think that, as he gets older, I mean, we're ignoring the cognitive issues that are going on there. And I try to stay grounded and find the realistic avenue of how these things are happening. But I do think it's a combination of that. Also for those that believe in, spiritual aspects of things and the spiritual warfare that we're in, we're going to see more and more of true colors coming out, I think, out of these people. So, I can't speak for Joe Biden, but it is very creepy. It's very, we can't deny what's happening and what we're seeing. But also to bring up somebody that's in the news, and I think a lot of people are ignoring or not ignoring, but kind of not paying attention as much because of the industry that it's in and who it is and everything, is P. Diddy, Sean Combs. And and there's a lot, and that's how they've gotten away with it for so long, right? Put the celebrities out or make it seem like it's just a music hip hop, thing, and it's not. What his situation is really revealing is a lot of how the elites and celebrities are connected to law enforcement. They are their enforcers. Law enforcement, goes along with it, as well as having the courts paid off. And how people do know about it, but they don't talk about it. Just like Cindy McCain said about Epstein, right? Everyone knew about it, but what were we going to do about it? Which I used to be very upset about hearing that. But now that I've been in this and experienced firsthand, I think she might have more validity to her statement. Everyone does know about it, but we can't do anything about it. The courts won't do anything. They're paid off. And all that does go into CPS and family court as well. It's the same kind of racket, and that's what's getting our children. That is the source of our child trafficking of any type, including child sex trafficking in America domestically. So what do we think that looks like, right? Is it going to be, we know what it looks like in India. We know what it looks like in Bangkok, unfortunately. We even know now what it looks like on the border. But, what does child trafficking look like in America, the land of the free, the land of the influencers and the 2.5 kids in a white picket fence? It's not going to be, horrific. It's through our government and the people that we see doing this and having this attraction that is to a certain level of power. This is not even necessarily at a point for people like Joe Biden, for example, and this is my opinion. It's not really even about children at that point. It's about the power. It's about the control. It's a lot of blackmail. And we're seeing this come out in grounded ways instead of all the crazy, that we've been hearing for the last 3 years that was being put out. Kind of like, it was like the wave coming back of satanic panic. Everyone was starting to figure out stuff. And then we get, all the crazy, stuff being talked about with children, and not necessarily that it's untrue, but being put in a context to be mocked or, when you hear it, to automatically dismiss it or chalk it up to conspiracy theory. And again, unfortunately, it's a very grounded, very real way that this is happening in our country and to loving American families and children, across the nation.
Yeah, and it's. And of course, you talked about the finders, and explain a little bit about some people that don't know. We McMartin, I covered McMartin preschool, and that's a very interesting case. But were the finders before McMartin? But were they the first ones we heard about? Were they before the Franklin preschool? Franklin credit scandal?
Yeah. Well, it was right around the same time. It was around 87 was the finders. McMartin was. Gosh, now the year, I don't have my notes in front of me, so I apologize, Don.
Yeah, actually, McMartin, I think, went into the 90s, maybe. I'm not sure. Late 80s,
Yeah,
early 90s,
yeah, I
maybe, something
believe
like
it
that.
was after, especially with the length of the cases and the trials and all of that. We can't forget Boys Town, which was before all of that, and that was
Yeah, that
leading up
was
to
supposed
and
to
around the same
Frankie
time
Graham.
of Adam and Johnny Gosh and Eton Pats. And, that was the thing too. It wasn't little girls that were going missing as the majority. It was young boys that were going missing.
Yes.
So at the time. Yeah. And then we saw the milk cartons come out, and actually they didn't just do milk cartons at the time. They were doing pizza boxes as well. And what did that do? This put missing children on a milk carton that every child and parent looked at every morning while they're eating their cereal. And it made children fear, could this happen to me? And it instilled the stranger danger. And a lot of the things that we're questioning now today, like narrative versus truth,
Yeah, no, and you're right. It did. I mean, I remember, of course, I grew up back in the Stone Ages, but we did. The only thing we heard back then was don't get in a strange car, never take candy from a stranger. But I mean, I don't know, maybe I wasn't attracted to them. I don't know, but I never saw. I used to ride my bike miles from home during the summer, and it never occurred to me that, because if they had those, where, I don't know where the pedophiles were then, but they could have had any of us and nabbed them and had us cross 5 state lines, because our parents weren't going to even wonder unless we didn't come home for dinner or something. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what's going, if the organizations weren't there then or whatever, but it seems to have exploded since the 60s. And I still just have a hard time believing that there are that many people who they want little kids. I don't, especially if they're so powerful, you think they'd want aspiring supermodels or something. I don't get it. I mean, what do you think? You think it's the adrenochrome? Is there some esoteric reason here?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a multifaceted thing, but we also, to backtrack for a second, we have to remember that before Adam, there wasn't a lot of child protection initiatives. People didn't worry, like you just said yourself. You would go out, you would ride your bike around the neighborhood, you would come home for dinner, things like that. And so people weren't really worried about that. There wasn't this initiative. Adam's case really set into play this stranger danger, the getting nabbed out of, by vans and out of the mall and different scenarios like that, which then they took and, created the National Center based off of, which what that did was they needed statistics, right? You need an issue to be able to get funding and make an organization on. So, that's where we start to look at these cases and what was really going on in them. And for instance, in Adam's case, who was John and Reve Walsh? Who were they before Adam disappeared? Who are these parents, and what are they involved in prior to their children, something happening to their children or their children going missing? And then furthermore, with the establishment of an effort that has now legislation, which we know how that works now. Lobbying has hurt us greatly behind the scenes when things are passed without our vote or without an election. We're seeing databases and things that are now used to target us, which is happening within CPS from these things that have been passed, like the Adam Walsh Act. That was supposed to be a sex offender registry. Well, to me and you, and I know everybody else that I talk to, you assume it's a pedophile registry. It's not a pedophile registry. They won't even actually tell us the percentage of pedophiles that are on it versus every other kind of sex offender. So is this a constitutional act that's passed comes into question. Is this actually even protecting, which we see that it's not actually protecting children. It's just double jeopardy and unconstitutional. And there's other ways to handle sex offenders. That's different from a pedophile, if we're, for point's sake, if I'm explaining that properly. So we need to be addressing it's not this stranger danger. It's not these sex offenders lurking in your neighborhoods. What it really is, who are the modern child predators? Who are the child predators of today? And we find that we're seeing across the board teachers, and we've known, right, Don? We know the rule. Whoever is attracted to children or wants to prey on children will put themselves in positions of power or closest to children. So we're seeing that with, again, teachers, doctors in the hospitals. We're
Coaches.
seeing
Yeah,
it
yeah.
with CPS, obviously. Yeah, I mean, coaches. We're seeing it with politicians or celebrities like P. Diddy, and Drake it's come out with him and Millie Bobby Brown at 13 years old. I mean, this is something in Hollywood and that has gone on through history, and we kind of just overlook it.
I didn't hear about Millie
Yes.
Bobby Brown. What is that? That's something that what she's claiming, or somebody's claiming about her, or what?
Don, there's a big rap battle going on right now. I hate to tell you, there's Drake.
I'm not in the loop.
Yeah, Drake and Kendrick Lamar are doing their rap
Oh, I
battling.
did hear something about that. Oh, I heard something about that. Yeah, okay.
And
Millie Bobby Brown figures in there.
He pointed out a lot of things about Drake pertaining to minors, and people are now putting two and two together and creating videos. I think I posted one yesterday on my Twitter about Drake and the continual, young girls and his relationship with Millie Bobby Brown since she's been 13. There's it's across the board.
She's been through some real stranger things, I guess. Boy,
some definite stranger things. Yeah. So have I. So it's okay. When you're in that world, it's Stranger Things. They named it that for a reason. So back to kind of just this how did we get to this point, right? Is where kind of we were going to get back. Is that, we didn't have really all these different avenues and all these different efforts and all these different laws and everything for children back then. And as we're seeing with the lobbying and nonprofits, we'll think and even with laws in general or acts that are being passed or different things that, we'll see it looks good on the surface, and then there's the fine print, right, that usually contains the agenda. So we've seen that happen, across the board. But how did this go about? So we look at before and who these parents are, who the people are, who the ones that came in, like Ernie Allen or Hank Asher of LexisNexis and Matrix and all of that, who was an ex-drug trafficker and best buddies with my father. He really is the reason that we're all on databases and a big contribution to FISA. And then we see, the creation of the National Center, creating these other nonprofits, like I said, while they're passing, and lobbying for legislation and doing all of that. And then we see it come in, things like Title IV, which is for CPS, and really putting incentives and quotas on taking our children through the system. So, and also then we see ASFA later on, signed by Bill Clinton, which incentivized and monetized adoption, which is now the modern day selling of our children, and huge violations of their children's rights, actually. So we look at that, and then if we compare it to the original kind of intent and goal of the Finders cult, we see a lot of correlations in terms of the Finders cult. For those who aren't familiar, were the two gentlemen let me backtrack for a second. It was a cult that was founded by a military guy, Marion Petty, and he had they had a farm property in Virginia, about an hour and a half outside of DC. And they were a cult of basically just normal people in your community, lawyers, computer techs, bank assistants, that kind of a thing. And they were collecting data. Well, fast forward, you can look into it if you want to know the real background. They did a D-class about, I think it was last year, maybe a little bit longer. They did verify that it was originally a CIA operation. So they put it out as this cult. They said, oh, this is the satanic, alternative lifestyle cult. And really, we later find out, which many, knew for a long time, it was a CIA operation. So when the case happened in '87 in Jacksonville, two gentlemen were arrested with 6 children in a park, and they were very dirty and didn't have shoes on. Yes, only one of them was verbal. Yes. And they took the children in. They did show signs of sexual abuse. The gentleman said that we're 2 gentlemen. We have the permission of all of their parents to be taking these children across the border to Mexico to a gifted school, for a gifted program. And then if we backtrack and look at what the Finders cult, part of their, ideology, if you will, was raising children in the way of it takes a village, which we've heard before from Hillary Clinton, right? So it takes a village, and the children would be born to breeder mothers for the cult, and they would be weaned from the mothers and raised by others in the cult and in the community. Reading was highly emphasized, and gifted children and all of that. So it was about, it gets speculative after that, but they did have, photographs of, the children sacrificing goats, which they said, we were teaching them how to slaughter and things like that. But then we also have the DC warehouse, right, Don? We've got the warehouse that they had right outside of Washington, DC, around the time.
Disgusting things in it, yeah.
Horrible things, which actually I just pulled yesterday. I'll have to send it to you. I pulled the deposition of a gentleman who was my father's other boss at the Diplomat Hotel by the name of, his last name was Collins, William Collins, Bill Collins. And his wife actually came forward months after the Finders cult came out and were busted, and which got dropped, by the way, for the end of that story. That, it was a long story. Please look into it. But everything got suddenly dropped and settled and everything. And now we know it was because the CIA and our government was involved and behind it. And now I just lost my train of thought to where I was going next to preface that. So I apologize, or just to finish that up.
But I covered that in the book and too in Hidden History, and you're right. I mean, you consider these basically, it almost looked like these kids might have been raised in the woods or something, because they were dirty. They didn't have couldn't communicate verbally, and the DC police just dropped this like a hot potato. I mean, nothing happened. What happened to the Finders after that? Because they seem to have gone on their merry way. Do they still exist somehow? I don't know.
They definitely exist. The promise of the Finders cult was, monetary success and sexual gratification were two of the main ones. And again, these are people that were regular in your community. They weren't something that you would call out and notice as weird or anything like that. And it also is a big testament to grooming children and what we're seeing today that's being hidden by stranger danger and all this other national center and other organizational grifts, meaning, just fronts for like we're doing something, but we're really collecting, $40 million of our taxpayer money a year and more. Is really the issue of family and neighborhood and close family friend grooming. We've got MAPS is the new pedophile term that they're trying to normalize today, minor attracted people. We had the Sound of Freedom. Yeah, we had the Sound of Freedom movie, which was great, for people that are completely unaware of what child trafficking is. But the actual case on that movie was not at all what they said. It's definitely not just glamorized for it. They changed the entire case, and it actually took away from what one of the main issues in America is, which is that the gentleman was taking the little boy over the border to Mexico. And he had done it several times before because he was the guy in the neighborhood, and the grandmother had her grandchildren, was raising them, and he had the pool and the toys and things, just like my dad is doing with my children as we speak. And he would take them, he would ask the grandmother, his permission to take him. He had taken him several times, allegedly back and forth over the border of Mexico. And that time happened to be that he didn't have his passport, and that's how they busted him, not what the movie said. So unfortunately, that was an unfortunate part of it, because that really was a testament and a real case to this, this kind of community.
Speaking of which, I think since we talked last, I didn't have a chance to ask you, what did you think? And I've already forgotten the name of the movie. The movie that with Jim Caviezel or whatever was in last year. The one about child sex trafficking.
That's what I was just talking about.
Okay,
Sound
so
of Freedom.
Sound of Freedom. You were talking about that. Okay, yeah. So, what was your opinion of that?
Again, Don, I've waited a minute to talk about it, but again, no one's going to say don't watch something for awareness on what child trafficking is. But again, what we are dealing with here is understanding what the child protection grift is, if you will. What is this front that's being put out, and then really how effective is it? And we're seeing actually this is how children are being trafficked for the majority of it. And so when we talk about this movie, I wanted to support it. I really did. But what it is, OUR is it's another copycat shell organization of the national, from the National Center for Missing Exploited Children prototype. Tim Ballard is the John Walsh character for that organization. He mongers you with the emotional stuff and the trauma and the graphic stuff. It's really child trafficking porn at this time. And I say that, with a heavy heart and with all due respect. But it's not solving an issue. We see horrible issues on the back ends of, what are these operations he was really doing? He's now being sued for, sexual abuse and harassment. And again, why? My big question lately, Don, is, why, when we look at all of these figures that are the faces for these child initiatives, protection initiatives, why are they all sexual deviants?
Yeah, that's so you're saying Ballard is, or
yeah, I mean, he has been, that is what's come out in the past. I mean, probably what was it, 8 months ago came out. He is being sued. And many of the women came forward, including the assistant that I had an encounter with at Turning Point when I approached him and tried to ask him to focus on American child trafficking and domestic child trafficking.
That's what I noticed. They stayed away from that.
Yeah. No one will talk about that. So we put out these big things like CSAM is the new National Center for Missing Exploited Children grift online, the child sex abuse material. They well can stop that. We have so many reports of people. I get them every other day. I reported this video. This child's being trafficked on this and that platform. Here's the email from the cyber tip line for National Center telling me they can't do anything about it, so on and so forth. And that's how I started, 4 years ago and got into this mess where my children, where my children and my life were taken, because I started getting calls from the people, actually, from parents and, the population saying, hey, we made this report, or why is my child listed missing and he's not missing? We have a huge case on, people can go find it on Twitter at Teachers Against Trafficking is the name of their page. The handle is something different. I'm sorry, I can't remember right now, but also Yeshua's Dad, at Yeshua's Dad, is another account. And it is a father and son who were sex trafficked. The son, was sex trafficked. And that was facilitated through Amber Alert. So the father was a great guy in the community, had custody of his son Yeshua since he was very young, because actually the mother of Yeshua, the maternal grandmother, so the maternal grandmother to Yeshua, actually had trafficked Yeshua's mother her entire life since she was the age of 3. So back to this family, community, close-knit trafficking of children. And so the father, Othello, had custody of Yeshua since he was young. And he made this great community program where he was teaching youth in the community around Henderson, Nevada, actually. So this is out in Nevada for those that were wondering. He made a community program where he's teaching the youth how to do what they love, within entertainment and online and different things without having a contract or an agency or the old school method, right? Where that is also trafficking in itself, we're finding out. But it had huge success and the crime rates were going down actually amongst the youth in the community. And so he put a bid in for the next year to the county, for the funding for that next year for his program. And he actually won the bid, and he wasn't aware that the other people going for the bid, who he was against, was the Las Vegas Metro Police, as well as the National Center for Missing Exploited Children. So from there, he was, fast forward a little bit, he was at Walmart shopping with his mother, so Yeshua's grandmother, and they were walking out and looking at the Walmart wall and, the children that are up there for the Amber Alert or the missing children. And all of a sudden they see an Amber Alert with his face and his son Yeshua's face on it, saying that he had this parental kidnapping. This is another grift. This is another made up thing to really what we're seeing keep the product in. So if a product escapes, then you can put out an Amber Alert, and we get it. We have the whole country looking for the product, and it gets brought back in.
So you're saying this was facilitated through Amber Alert. So Amber Alert is corrupt.
Oh, the National Center is Amber Alert was developed. That's Laura Silsby with Haiti. Again, Hank Asher, John Walsh. You will hear the same names keep coming up. And the National Center, again, I'm going to skip off, please look into that case. It's an amazing case. The father, after that, this is also with the U.S. Marshals. My father is one of three in history, and Reagan being one of the other ones. I can't remember the third, but honorary U.S. Marshals in history. And so what we're finding, and people are coming forward in terms of them using this system against people to retaliate or to keep their secrets quiet or to traffic their children for one reason or another, especially through the family court. If the abuser is connected to law enforcement or politics or anything, they're using the system to facilitate their retaliation or their lawfare or their own agendas and needs, aside from them selling out, populations, children, or putting them in foster homes and getting the drug contracts and everything and drugging them up and putting them out on the street where they're now molesting each other. So we're there, guys.
I saw you.
And we slipped around a little bit, but Yeshua. Yeah, sorry, Don, but I just want to finish this real quick with Yeshua and his father, Othello.
Yeah,
The Amber Alert was put out, I think, I can't remember the amount of, but it was over 10 U.S. Marshals suddenly come in Othello's house at gunpoint with Yeshua and his grandmother there, and they arrest the father. They're arresting protective parents. They're locking us up. And then they take the child and they say it's for the best interest of the child, where then Yeshua was given to the abuser. We're seeing the system, and these judges are giving them to pedophiles and abusers and ex-cons, gave Yeshua to that maternal grandmother, who then at the age of 7 started sex trafficking him out to politicians in the state, through Obama, through Kamala Harris. This is from their, this is what they allege. And they have filed federal RICO like I have. Ours have all been dismissed because the courts and the judges are in their pockets. And so he's asking for due process. He's 17 now, and he's an incredible young man, and he is the youngest whistleblower, America's youngest whistleblower on CPS and the politicians and everything that's going on with this racket, that then we can easily see a theme and a trend going back to what we started with, those historical issues like Franklin and Boys Town and things like that.
Well, I'm bringing on here Chris Graves. Chris Graves is one of the world's best researchers. He's helped me out on several of my books, and he knows this. And he's been wanting to talk to you. We talked about him last time here, and he has some. He probably has more informed questions than I do because he's really read up on all this stuff. Chris, good to have you again. What would you like to ask Meghan?
I just have two questions, Meghan. Were you able to find out anything about the tunnels that apparently really were found underneath the McMartin School by the parents years after the fact? And also, was there any kind of update with the gentleman that was claiming to be your brother Adam?
Thank you. Two great questions. And I hope we can connect from what Don has to say about you. I hope we can actually do that outside of this. So the tunnels, we can only know what we've been told. I didn't get to go there and investigate myself. I would have if I could have, but no, we do know that the tunnels, from Ted Gunderson has investigated and things and covered this. But what they ended up or concluded from those that were hands-on there was that they were filled in. They were cemented in. There were things like a Disney bag, a plastic bag from Disney found under.
Yeah, like copyright 1984 was on it and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So there were those things down there, and then suddenly they're filled in. We see that happening for different things. We have those cases, and then suddenly the building is torn down, or the foundation is replaced, or different things like that. For the update on Lily and slash Adam, there isn't much of an update. Again, I can only I can't solve that. We tried to do DNA. They said it got lost. Where I stand on it is, it's either him or it's not him, meaning it's either him, and this is a lot of why this stuff would also be happening, but also with the timing and the way that they did everything, it could have been somebody that they actually sent in to make me look crazier, to solidify more their narrative,
Right.
of the playbook. She's crazy, she's this and that. So
But did you get a good
I'm actually
feeling
being
about?
gate kept from him, so I don't have an update, because I did give his contact information to a trusted person that we ended up finding out was not on the right side, and she is exploiting it and holding his information from me. So
I'm sorry to hear that, Megan, and I didn't mean to bring it up. I just one of those stories that is very curious to me, because a lot of these stories you find out there's all kinds of other narratives that are completely made up. So I just didn't know if did you get a good, like, personally, did you feel like you could have been related to this gentleman? Like, what was, like, in terms of just on a personal level?
Yeah, when I did meet him, I mean, he's got issues, and he's a very eccentric individual for sure. But I have to say that I did feel definitely a connection. I think that no matter who this person is, and he actually holds the same accord. He says, I have these memories. I don't know who I am. I'm not, I'm okay if I'm told and shown that I'm not Adam, but I have these memories. I have this, this whole history that I do remember, and I know mom and dad and this kind of stuff. So for me, again, it has to play out. I would love to talk to him. I think his story needs to be heard. I think it needs to be investigated. That's, people have wanted me to say things like sacrifice about Adam, or these harsh kind of putting me in a corner. And really the whole time, all I've ever asked was for the National Center to be investigated. The public has a lot of questions that they should have to answer, but they don't have to as a nonprofit. And are they actually a government agency that's fronting as a nonprofit for those loopholes and those powers? And also for the reopening of Adam's case. We have far too much that has come to light, since the closing of it, the convenient closing of it by Joe Matthews with a patsy, Otis Toole. And I think for the American public, I think that's also very vital to be reinvestigated and looked at, especially when we know what the dealings were of my father and his bosses and the entire lifestyle leading up to the disappearance of Adam.
And do you put the theories when it comes to people like Jeffrey Dahmer? Do you think that was just put out to the public, just as sensationalism and things like that? Because I don't really see any real evidence that Dahmer had anything to do with Adam's death personally.
He didn't. These are patsies that were created by the CIA. I mean, Otis Toole and Henry Lee Lucas told us themselves, that we were chosen to be the ugly faces. The only way that they would even have any relevance to it would be, why were all three of them in South Florida? Why were these serial killers down there? What's the essence to, Otis Toole and Jeffrey Dahmer and some of these people having cannibalism in their background or satanic ritual abuse, which, again, that's the other aspect of all of this that America refuses to acknowledge, including National Center for Missing Exploited Children. They've been asked about the statistics or their information or their resources regarding, satanic ritual abuse on children. And their reply, I saw it for myself in email, was, we don't have anything on that you need to talk to your local, law enforcement or whatever for that kind of stuff. So it's always passing the buck. And we need to keep an eye on that stuff.
Yeah, I will say this though.
Well, they're
Well, Don, just the only other thing I wanted to add to
Yeah.
it, if there was any
Sure.
kind of truth to the Jeffrey Dahmer thing, if there was any kind of truth, in terms of, there was a story when he was in high school, or he made a phone call during a field trip, a class field trip, where he was granted access to Walter Mondale's private office, I believe, when he was vice president. And then
Huh.
you see other things, like with John Wayne Gacy has Secret Service credentials, and he's getting a picture next to Rosalind Carter. It's just weird stuff. And then you hear about, like, Ted Bundy was like going undercover for the
I
Republican
was about to say that. Yeah, and
Party.
he was cell neighbors at one point with Otis Toole. I mean,
Yes,
you guys,
yeah.
this is a CIA. These are patsies. They were trained to do this. They're paid opposition. You know, the whole narratives about Otis Toole or Jeffrey Dahmer being involved with Adam's case is to detract from the fact that most likely my parents had more to do with the case than they want anybody to know. And we've seen that for
Right.
40 years plus, they have gone after anyone that has had a different narrative or questioned it or brought it out. And that's as soon as I started doing that, that's exactly what happened to me again, with my life and my children being taken and just ripped from me in a day. So the Jeffrey Dahmer thing and stuff, you know, it's interesting because, again, he was stationed in Germany as well, right before he came back to the States. You know, we go back to, you know, that, and then with Henry Lee Lucas and Otis Toole talking about what a lot of people dismiss as the Hands of Death cult. And the whole satanic cult down in South Florida that they were a part of, whether you believe that or not. So, you know, there's all those elements that play in. And then here we have a missing boy case, which, you know, who are the conspiracy theorists? The government wants us to believe that there were 3 of the top, you know, most notorious serial killers in, you know, a couple blocks radius on the same day for one just random little boy. So I can't really buy that. And then we do find out that Henry Lee Lucas was already locked up. He was never even involved in Adam's case, or could have even been involved in Adam's case. So, you know, it doesn't add up. We have on justiceforadam.com, I said it, I believe, last time, but justiceforadam.com has all of Adam's case files, police reports, everything. And you know, I can't say it enough. If the public saw this case today, there would be no question what was going on. It would never be chalked up to what it has been. And the immediate question would be what was going on with this love triangle between John and Reve Walsh, and Reve's younger live-in lover at the time, who moves out just weeks before this little child goes missing, in the middle of these dynamics with their drug use and their affiliations with the Diplomat Hotel, which is where we see every media, politician, celebrity of the time converging in a hotel space, which we know what goes on there, also related to huge, you know, human trafficking and drug use and all of that. As well as what my father's boss and my father himself were involved in throughout the Bahamas and South Florida, and how that all correlates to the same players that then we see later. I mean, these people have known each other for a long time. They, you know, work together, and now we see different things being implemented throughout the decades since this first initiative with Adam that has now led to CPS, you know, databases on our children, family court corruption. We see, and who are those people? How did we start this starting out? What were the finders called? They were normal people or people of affluence in your community. So that's judges, GALs, social workers, all of that to date. And we've seen that go through, like I said, you know, through Title IV and things like ASFA, slipped in by the Clintons, slipped in by Jeff Koons, Ernie Allen, John Walsh, and with politicians like Mark Foley. Talk about Boys Town, the pages at the White House, and Mark Foley. You know, all of these people behind have sexual deviance of some sort. We've got Richard Branson starting the International Center, who was connected to NXIVM sex cult, and Donita Terramar, which is Ghislaine Maxwell. We have Jeff Koons, that is the co-founder of the National Center, who did the $91.1 million Chrome Rabbit. Talk about adrenochrome, the Chrome Rabbit. Follow the White Rabbit, and you'll find the child trafficking. And if you ask me, after years of research and being, tormented and terrorized from what I question, I do believe thoroughly, with all my heart, that unfortunately this is the child trafficking domestically as well as now globally, as Ted Gunderson and Kathy O'Brien and others will attest, that it was created to be the front for the actual domestic child trafficking.
Right. Do you see the question on the screen from Chris Buchan? I'm not sure what Chris means about ask Meghan if she knows about the underground bases. I mean, lots of rumors of underground bases. Do you know what he might mean by that? That is connected to this? He doesn't mean the underground tunnels with McMartin, I don't believe.
No, he's talking about like China Lake and the Finger Lakes and things like that. So yeah, I mean, again, have I ever been in any of those underground bases? No, I'm not that survivor to talk about that, so I can't give a firsthand account. Yeah. But we do know about China Lake. We know about the Finger Lakes and the military tunnels. I mean, these aren't that crazy. You can get maps of military tunnels, the tunnels under New York City. And then I do have a picture of myself as a child at the White House, which I was there often and presented to Reagan at just a few weeks old in the Rose Garden.
I saw you posted that photo. Yeah.
Yeah, when we're talking about this child trafficking issue, and the rose comes up a lot and everything. So there I am being presented in the Rose Garden. But we also have pictures where I'll be in a dress and I'm up in the White House, with people around me, always with strangers, always being taken around, being held, all of this. And then we do have an image where, there's cinder blocks behind my mother and I and all of us, meaning we're under the White House. And when people were talking about this, I didn't really understand why it was so crazy. I mean, I've been in the tunnels under Disney in Orlando. They take you through tours if you want to go, and they say that it's just for, characters to get from one side of the park to the other. But what are they used for at night, or, other times, I guess you would ask. But same goes for the White House. When I started hearing that, I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I've been down in the White House, the service entrances. I knew I could picture the cinder blocks and everything. And then there we find some pictures exactly of that, proving it. I have posted those as well. So that's what I know about underground bases. Of course, I know the other generic, general information that we've all heard about underground bases as well. I hope that was Chris.
Chris also might be talking about the Presidio too, with Michael Aquino.
Yeah,
there were underground bases there as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you for reminding me that. I actually brought that up earlier. Forgot.
And Chris is talking about, apparently, I didn't know this was a part of QAnon, that the white hats are fighting battles in these underground bases. Is that a part of Q now too? Can there actually be good guys down there? These white hats we're all waiting for?
That's a rumor. That's the rumor. I don't know about it, but that's the rumor.
Yeah, the storm is coming or whatever.
Well,
whatever they kept talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
John
we're certainly
Walsh,
waiting for it, because he's just.
Sorry, I was going to say John Walsh in court said that I was a Trumper and a domestic terrorist and a QAnon. And so there's no such thing as QAnon, and I had never voted. I still haven't ever voted.
I was just going to ask you what your dad's politics are, because I kind of think of him, because he's this law and order guy and wanting to track people down. I kind of assumed he was like a conservative Republican, but it doesn't sound. Or is he a rhino? What is? Does he actually support Joe Biden, the sniffer in chief? He doesn't see anything, scary in those pictures of him.
Right. So I always assumed the same, Don, and I've hated politics my entire life because I grew up in it and I've seen all the BS and the two sides of the same coin. So my mother, ironically, is a staunch Trumper and Republican, and she loves it, but she's actually a rhino. And my father has always been very poignant to say, I'm independent because I'm here for the kids and I'm not on either side. But this is why, he says, because I'm the only guy that can go up to any politician in the halls of Congress or Capitol Hill and pin them against the wall and tell them to do what's right. So that's what my dad likes. He has voted for Obama. He has voted for Obama and Biden, and to me, when they honored Beau Biden and Hunter received the award, was chosen to receive the award on behalf of his deceased brother in 2016 for the National Center. To me, that was really showing an allegiance. And that's another thing that I started questioning with the National Center. Is this a globalist think tank at this point? Has this been infiltrated? We've got the World Economic Forum and the International Center for Missing Exploited Children working with The Hague. We've got all of these people. If you look at anyone on the board or donors and different things like that, administratives, it's all, big tech companies, energy, all of these things that would actually profit. Airbnb, Meta, Pokemon, things that we've already seen trafficking our children or having issues with it. Are all involved with the center. So we really have to start, asking, and we don't ask these questions because we hear it's children and we think these people are doing good. And I have to be the bad guy. So I hope more people join me in that for our children.
Speaking of the Hunter Biden laptop, originally, when this first came out, at least the conspiracy world was claiming that on the laptop was you could see Hunter Biden raping a 10-year-old Chinese girl. And they also said that there were lots of pictures and video of his then 14-year-old niece, Beau's, his dead brother's, of course he was, having sex with his brother's wife. Yeah, but this was his niece, and she's, exactly. She's in various states of undress on this video, which would obviously be illegal. But nobody ever talked about that anymore. Then all she saw, he's with a prostitute. He's doing crack, not good stuff, but not at that level. Do you know anything about that and why the alt media just dropped that part of the laptop?
Well, the frazzle drip too, Don. Let's not forget frazzle drip.
Yeah, I don't think that they've necessarily dropped it. Yeah, Frazzle Drip is the video with Uma Abedin and Hillary Clinton, correct? With the little girl's face.
Supposedly
that's Weiner's
on the dark web. Yeah. On the dark web, allegedly.
That's Anthony Weiner's laptop, right? Okay, yeah.
Well,
who never saw that? So I guess we're never going to see Hunter's.
Well, Hunter Biden's laptop, we do know now that they have admitted that it was suppressed prior to the election, and that coming out was suppressed. You can actually find Hunter Biden's laptop at Marco Polo 501c3.com. So they're also on Twitter. So Marco Polo is Garrett Ziegler, who was under Trump, bright, young, amazing man. And they put out an entire book you can actually order and print of all of the emails from the Hunter Biden laptop, which I actually did expose the avenue of the National Center, the speeches and things that Hunter was given for that award acceptance, as well as Harvey Weinstein, Hillary Clinton, Jeff Koons, and Larry Gagosian, how they came up with this and how they launder money, through art and their private dinners to campaigns like Hillary's. So I exposed an email of Harvey to Hunter Biden saying, essentially, this is the last time I'm going to bug you about Hillary's campaign, but my buddy Jeff Koons, who, again, if you look into, is a huge sexual deviant, was accused by his ex-wife, who was a porn star from Eastern Europe, and she said he was crazy and, in bed and wanted all these crazy things. And she actually accused him of molesting their baby, walking in on him naked with the child and all these different things. And he used The Hague and created the Koons Foundation. So the Koons Family Foundation was created off of him using his connections and through Europe to get his son back from the mother who had ran to Europe to keep her and the child safe. And then he becomes a co-founder of the National Center for Missing Exploited Children, where then the Koons Family Foundation is now the law research side of it. And then we've got Ernie Allen, who was with the McCain Institute with Ashton Kutcher. And then we have the McCain Institute on the board of the National Center. We've got Jeff Koons, who was, Podesta owns his art. Alefantis and David Broderick own his art, as well as rumored to have been in a love triangle with him because he was originally a DC artist. What is that? The DC art world. I can't, I've launched things there. I've done artwork there. It's not a hopping, it's a very small crowd, which then also leads to Hillary Clinton and the Arts and Embassies program with Jeff Koons and Marina Abramovich. And he was facilitated to be there by that sale of the $91.1 million chrome rabbit through Sotheby's auction house. So, bought by Steve Mnuchin's father. So, it's a whole thing. It's all the same players.
You really do your homework. Meghan, you know your stuff. This reminds me so much of the way all these connections with people that are, obviously into this stuff themselves, that are in positions on organizations that are supposed to be, dedicated to stopping this. Reminds me very much what I found. I'm sure Chris knows this when I was writing my book, Bullyocracy, about bullying, where all the anti-bullying groups and all the anti-bullying advocates they're the biggest defenders of bullies. I had so many arguments
They're
with
all
them.
about
It reminds me very much of this. Yeah, they're all about. It's like these things. These outfits are set up as front groups, and they're really on the other side.
And that's what we're seeing with CPS now. These social workers are some of the most depraved people of our society. There's no training, there's no knowledge or child psychology, therapy, trauma specialists, nothing. They are mostly drug addicts. Many of them are swingers or on fetish sites and different things. They are on so many pills. They are teaching and telling the children to traffic themselves. I mean, it's really, they're falsifying documents. They are hindering case plans, which happened to me first and foremost. I can speak firsthand, on lying and falsifying documents. And it doesn't matter because they're from literally the drudges of society, or they're, moms that think that they're doing well, or young people that are, get indoctrinated and groomed out of school or out of their homes as maybe a job after their children left the house, and they think they're doing well, are going to do well, and then they go in and it's the administrations and the higher ups, with incentives and quotas. You guys, there are incentives and quotas on our children's heads. That's bounties. That's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. So for the people who missed like your first couple interviews, explain was your life ever normal as a little kid? I mean, you were going to the White House and seeing Reagan. I guess that's, certainly something most people don't experience. But when did you first realize, again, I'm sure you already told us this, but to those who might have not caught the other shows, when did you first realize something was amiss with your father? When did you first start questioning what happened to Adam, and then led you down these paths where you really are an expert on this subject?
Thank you, Don. And I want to say hi to Australia. Hi, William. It's great to have people from all over watching and getting to know the information because it has spread out, especially in Australia and the UK. This is a big issue. Okay, so Don, you're born into it. You think this is, I honestly would sit and say, thank you, God. I don't know what I did, but thank you for this, family and for this life. And I believed what everyone else believed, for a long time. But also it's a lot of Stockholm, when you're abused by your parents, you love your parents. A child loves their parents. They love them even with abuse, And my parents, the type of abuse in these families is more psychological, emotional, things like that. It's not necessarily getting beat up. I mean, my mom definitely was physically abusive with me growing up, and she was my main abuser. But it was very hard, and that's something I'm still trying to kind of articulate, to explain to people. I think there's people that do it better than myself. That's kind of why I keep my head down, and I'm a facts gal, so CPS is kind of easy for me, and this child issue and all the things that we've talked about are of course way easier for me to talk about than my own experiences. But growing up, there was always issues in my family. I talk about a public persona versus private life. It's just like we see with P. Diddy is P. Diddy, but behind closed doors he's Sean Combs, right? So my dad's name happens to be the same on both fronts, but we have my father has a history of domestic violence because a need for control. I grew up with mistresses calling while I'm putting my little brother down for a nap. My dad came to my birthday parties with, a black eye and stitches in his hip and said it was from a car accident, when we find out it was from like a substance in abuse, or a substance induced, thing at a hotel with a girl or a woman. He came out on Larry King Live on my 21st birthday saying I am a sex addict, and he went to Passages and all these different kinds of things. So, it was trickled out. And I think, again, it's that public, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it's that public persona and that public grooming. Who doesn't recognize John Walsh's voice tonight on America's Most Wanted, and all of this. And so there is that aspect, which does get into the deeper things like programming and Mockingbird and frequencies and different things like that as well. But, I grew up in it and thinking that I was, very lucky. We were told, how lucky we are to have this. We're bad kids. We're this and that. And we're just so lucky to have everything we have. So we better be quiet and be happy, and I grew up a lot in my closet. It had great artwork all over the inside of it. I'll say that much. But, it was where I could pull out the drawers and my mom couldn't open the door enough to get to me. I kept this graceful for a long time. I worked with therapists and family therapists, asking my family and my parents to come to therapy and work on these, not having to come out and talk about this, or to respect my family. Because I do respect my family. I love my parents, and I think that they got caught up in a lot of bad stuff before Adam even happened. I know that they have a lot of trauma and they've been put through a lot, but it also doesn't excuse, what they could be a part of, nor make it my responsibility. My responsibility and duty is to be asking these questions, knowing who my parents are, to come forward and to keep trying to discuss these things so that we can truly be protecting our children and maintaining our American families, because that is what they need most of all.
Absolutely.
Meghan, growing up, did you ever notice any kind of like Hollywood handlers like around your household? Like
Yeah, and I want to, not to cut you off, Chris, I'm sorry, but I wanted to finish. Don did ask me in terms of when did I start questioning things. I started questioning things really when my best friend growing up in the Finger Lakes, her name was Lindsay Harris. I went away to college, and you kind of lose touch once in a while. I think I mentioned her on the last show, and she was actually approached by a gentleman who was in the music industry. She was groomed and trafficked out to Las Vegas, where she was murdered, and then America's Most Wanted profiled her case many times and made up the narrative versus the truth of the story. And that really obviously was upsetting to me. My father and I had several arguments, including the first one in front of her own grieving parents. And so that really got me questioning things. Then also I started questioning Adam's case once I became older and started, like I just said, reaching out for support for my family in terms of therapy and healing for my parents, because I actually have years of training and certifications and things behind me in terms of trauma healing, childhood trauma, how that affects us later in life, how we can heal those traumas and actually make them some of our greatest assets and ways that we can help other people, and how to move forward from healing those in your older, your adult years, if you will. So for me, I had a great support system at that time. I had a great understanding, and I started realizing a lot of the abuse that I went through that I hadn't, because I loved my parents. I didn't. You don't see that necessarily. And then I started seeing it affect, them start to do it exactly at the same times and ages with my own children. And I started speaking up that, if you're going to continue this, or you're going to abuse my children in this way, especially psychologically, emotionally, and alienating me, I didn't want the cake and cookies and mansions that I grew up with. I wanted my children to be in church. I wanted them to be in a community. I wanted them to be on a farm growing up. These are the things that I was doing with my family, and I have a right to do. But according to John Walsh, who has a history of his coercive control, and Reve, who's even worse. That wasn't okay. And they happen to be the ones that have helped set up this system for decades. These are their buddies. And, that's how we're seeing it play out in terms of that. But I started questioning my brother's case really when I started realizing, these are my parents. This is how my parents are to us, now to my children. Well, what were they when Adam was alive? And how did this, lead up to his disappearance, especially knowing the other lover in the house and whatnot, other details of their lifestyle.
And even Chris had asked you about it. Did you see?
I'm sorry. Sorry, sorry.
No, I was just going to say if you still had that question, or you had something else, Chris.
No, it was just.
Okay, Chris. What did you guys?
It's just I'm a big fan of the late Dave McGowan and his research, and he went into things like Laurel Canyon with the CIA's influence on Hollywood and public opinion and everything. And I was just asking Miss Walsh if she remembers there being any kind of Hollywood handlers around her household at the time. Maybe she doesn't remember anything like that, and also the weird circumstances around the day that he disappeared at the mall and everything.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last end of it because I was asking for water, but I will let you know that, yes, I saw handlers. We can get to the second part, Chris. Yes, I definitely saw handlers growing up. Starting from the beginning, my father's bodyguards, quote unquote bodyguards, were these New York cops. Thank you very much. These New York cops, that were more handlers than bodyguards, if you will. My mother was probably the biggest handler that I watched my entire life with my father. They say, for those Q guys out there, they say follow the wives. That's a very real thing. My mother's abused my father my entire life, and vice versa, though. And a lot of these celebrity couples, it's narcissism. It's a lot of these different issues that allow it to be mutually abusive. So I saw that, as well as, we had nannies. So that's a type of handler. I saw Joe Matthews, who is the gentleman who declared that Otis Toole was the one who killed Adam. He's very much, in my opinion, a handler to my parents. He keeps the narrative and he keeps them where they need to be. A lot of it does lead to my father potentially having CIA connections, or, being sought out for that, if you will, before Adam even went missing. And then we see, the National Center immediately after. And then, of course, America's Most Wanted, which was Rupert Murdoch, and the start of propaganda and police state and idolizing police in America, things like that. As well as adding to that stranger danger and, giving the nation the worst crimes they could find on a weekly basis, making it seem like it was a regular thing that we had to worry about, a lot of variables about that. As well as the biggest handlers, I don't think that people understand, but the biggest handlers are the agencies. That's who owns you and your family, or your corporation, right? So it'd be like Rupert Murdoch with Fox or different things like that, but also the agency. And ours is William Morris Endeavor, which is the largest in the world. And we see,
worse,
yeah. And the agent over us literally agents, right? Agents of the devil. That's what got me to leave the music industry and fashion to be a mother. Was I started saying, if Satan exists, like, what does he look like here? Is it contracts and men in dark suits and having you sign on the dotted line, things like that. So, the agency, Sean Perry was my dad's agent for a long time. In the recent years, he's announced that he left William Morris Endeavor to start his own venture. But the agency is a big part of the handling from behind the curtain, if you will.
Yeah, and also the details of the day that Adam disappeared too. I think you brought it up last time. Some of the things that your mother was saying didn't add up, right? Like with she left him in the car, I believe, in the parking lot of the Sears. Was that the case?
Many things didn't line up. You're right, Chris. But yeah, what you're referring to is that morning she allegedly went to drop off a check to pay for Adam's school at St. Mark's into the office there. And the secretary, when she was giving her deposition, questioned by the police, stated that Reve came in to pay the check, but Adam was not with her. Originally, she said that she left Adam in the car and came in. And then when she was questioned, I don't remember the amount of years later, but later thereafter, she changed her story that no, what are you talking about? I walked right in with his, holding his hand. He came in with me. He was with me. Also, what makes that suspicious is that, it's known and quoted and everything else about how Adam always needed to be with people and be close and touched and, he would never want to be left alone, things like that, which also make the leaving him alone at the video game section also a little suspicious, I hate to say. James Campbell, the lover,
how old was he?
He was
Wasn't
six
he
and a half
7
years
years old?
old.
Okay, yeah.
He was 6.5 years old. I do believe, that's another thing. They chose the baseball picture with the baseball bat. Who didn't at that point have someone in their family or a little boy that, had a baseball bat picture. But also to that, we see that that's the only one really where Adam looks like that, if you will. In other pictures, he has puffy eyes. He has other things that could lead to one thinking that he might have had fetal alcohol syndrome or on the spectrum of some sort, especially when you hear, that he
That's
was very
the only picture I think I've ever seen.
Oh, well, Google it.
Okay, because that's the one they always trot out. It's like it's like the only picture they ever throw out when the story's covered.
Yeah, exactly. And the Yeshua case that I brought up earlier, ironically, you'll see on their pages. And if you look into that case, his main picture is a little black boy with a baseball bat. So it's a very eerie thing going on with all of this. But there's that. Take it for what it's worth.
Do you see the question on screen from Karen Carpenter about JonBenet Ramsey? Any thoughts on that? Yeah, about John. Do you know anything? Have anything to say about JonBenet Ramsey? That's a case that still fascinates people.
It does. Colorado is a huge trafficking hub for children. We know that, as well as who were the Ramseys before. We have to be looking at these parents. Even my own father quotes, when something happens to a child, it's most likely a family member or someone close to the family. But yet for these cases, that seems to just go out the window conveniently, doesn't it? So I definitely would be looking more at the parents. I don't have I try to stray away from saying this is what happened. But, to me, there's way more elements to these stories that I think might have to do a lot more with the parents, with elements and aspects of satanic ritual abuse or elite rituals or different things like that than we really want to, than we do realize, nor do we want to realize. And so I do think that I think that they had something to do with her murder. Just like I think that my parents had something to do with Adam's murder. I think that they were actually killing them. No, maybe. But what they were involved in, or the people that they're involved with, or the things, their work, or different things that lead people to become compromised or do things that they wouldn't normally do. The same thing with the McCann case. McCann case created the international, was used to create the International Center for Missing Exploited Children. So we also have to look at these, people always say, people have said forever, why do some cases get picked for the media and some don't, right? Well, why don't we look at that closer? What came out of these different cases? What's the that was made? What control came from it? What benefited them, societally, and so on and so forth. We have to ask these questions.
And also, Megan, do you remember they tried to make Henry Lee Lucas one of the main suspects, like you were mentioning earlier, right? And who was the guy that saved Henry Lee Lucas's life in prison? The governor of Texas, George W. Bush at the time. Meanwhile,
the only one.
Meanwhile,
Oh,
he couldn't wait to send people to the electric chair, and yet he this guy they
And he suddenly he turns them.
this guy that
Yeah,
they
and
claim,
then furthermore, we see that, and I want to hear what you had to say. So I hate that I just cut you off, buddy. But furthermore, we see John Walsh in the Rose Garden with Bush signing a bill. I mean, if this guy pardoned the lover of my son's murderer, I would not necessarily be in the Rose Garden shaking his hand and signing bills. But that's me. I digress. Sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Don. I keep cutting you off. Sorry.
No. But I was going to go back to Madeleine McCann. These cases are so interesting because if there's and I've studied the John Benet Ramsey thing too much, and but I mean, there's obviously, and that one struck a chord with me because John Benet was almost the exact same age as my son, so we had two kids, a boy and a girl, just like us, and during the 1990s, that was the height of videotaping. If you're a parent in the 1990s, you have tons of tapes. You documented everything with your kids. Right? So this is a very wealthy family. So they're going to do that. And their testimony, for those who don't know, John Benet Ramsey was killed on Christmas night of all nights, amazingly. They broke into a mansion without leaving any evidence behind at all. But there's because they wanted to look at the videotape evidence, and of course they assumed that the entire thing would have been documented that Christmas morning. No, their battery ran. They claim they didn't charge the battery for some ridiculous excuse. And any parent living back then, come on, you know that there's a 911 call that somebody made 2 nights before at another party to the house, and people speculate it was John Benet. There's that woman that came out and talked about a sex cult, and then she disappeared. I don't even remember her name. She's never come back. But the Ramsey parents were certainly acted guilty. And then, of course, you have Burke, the very curious guy. If you saw his interview with Dr. Phil some years ago, you can see why people speculate about that. But then you have the Madeleine McCann case. If there are a group of parents that are kind of a match for the Ramseys, it's the McCanns. And again, as a parent, these are wealthy people. The woman was a doctor. I think they both were doctors. But their testimony is that they left. Madeleine, I think, was 3, and they had 2 younger children. She was the oldest. Yeah, to go to dinner, and they left them alone in their room. What?
Don, I think they were swinging. To be honest, I think on that one they were swinging. I hate to say it. I think a lot of this has to do with
that was the theory that they were swingers. You're right. You're right.
Well, and it was about my parents in the beginning too, and I thought that sounded absolutely ludicrous. But actually, what we find out is it was. We can have different definitions of swinging or open relationships or this kind of lifestyle, right? And that's what we see with my parents, with my father and my mother when Adam was alive. And again, I think there's a lot more to these stories in terms of satanic ritual abuse, sexual deviance, swinging, this type of lifestyle, and hand in hand with a wanting to be famous, right? Or we know that Ramsey, the pageants and all of that, stage mom type things. My mom was still is very much about, the money, and I have this, and my husband's a hotel guy, my husband's a TV star, and it's like the Stepford Wives, and that again correlates with the way that the Finders cult mothers were. Maybe not the money stuff, but they were detached from the children. Children were raised, we see the elites now having nannies raising their children, right? So that's essentially a concept from the Finders cult. It's towards that it takes a village and weaning the children from their mothers, and splitting them and putting them in gifted programs and MK Ultra. And what is that, what's the goal of doing that to children to create for the future? So, and it being stemming from the CIA, our own government. But McCann case, definitely, I want to bring that up real quick again before we get off of that. The McCann case, again, is Ernie Allen. We see Ernie Allen, this player who was already in Kentucky before the National Center in, law enforcement or heads of different things within Kentucky in his own right. And he comes in and is the face with Senator Byrd and stuff, but kind of the main guy behind, orchestrating all of this. National Center, International Center, Thorne, McCann, McCain, also Child Focus in Belgium that I brought up. He was flown over there and he taught the guy how to, and they've outright said, we want to create this for the prototype for, the rest of the world. I mean, that's in plain sight. It's just they thought that we weren't going to figure out, maybe the nefarious stuff, or people weren't going to start speaking up. I mean, I brought it up on the last one. They have the World National Center for Missing Exploited Children and the International Center claim the world's largest child porn database. Now, who has oversight over that, first of all? But more importantly, and furthermore, especially when we look at their donors like Les Wexner through L Brands, who's the backer of Epstein. Why is he donating to this? Who has access to this database, gentlemen? Who has access?
So you're saying the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children admits to having the largest child porn database in the world?
It's not admitting, it's bragging. I mean, that's everything. Right? Look at it. Everything is call the National Center, report the hotline, report the tip. This is all data collection. This is database collection on our children, on the parents, on everything. It goes hand in hand with CPS, with the doctors, with the social workers, with targeting children. This is the Finders cult motives played out on a bigger scale. If we look at that. They have made CPS, family court, the mandated reporters, everything to track and document our children from the day that they're born in the hospital or when you get a birth certificate. It is all this system. They have built this system over these decades to work perfectly as it is right now. Perfectly. And they are going in and they are taking beautiful children from loving homes and they disappear. They're adopted out by homosexuals now. They're given to abusers or they're molesting fathers or mothers or whatever the not good situation would be. I mean, it's absolutely horrifying. And if we say we can talk about this kind of stuff all day and the history and conjecture and maybe this or that, but the fact is that from April of 2021, John Walsh has been committing crimes against children and humanity with myself, never mind the other claims that are even before that, in terms of federally conspiring to federally abduct and kidnap my children under the color of law. These are administrative tribunals. There is no law behind CPS or family court. There's no due process. These are administrative tribunals in America happening to sever the rights for life. That's like equivalent to a capital sentence. Like this is very out of control. And we need to, my point here is that that's the part that we need to be focusing on. Why we're asking these questions, why we're having this conversation, because what have we allowed? What have we turned a blind eye to? What does, nonprofit and being able to not have oversight or have immunity and no accountability, which we're not just seeing in that arena, we're seeing it in the courts across America as we speak with the criminal justice system even, but then furthermore to be taking our children at a rapid rate with high incentives, payouts and quotas. These people are incentivized to do it. They get bonuses and they are destroying our children. The suicide rates of children and parents within the system or stuck in the system is growing rapidly by the day, and it's already been far too high. Why are children running away from CPS or their other quote unquote loving parent if they're not being abused or if the system is so great? It's a failing business at this point. It's not child protective services of any kind. It comes from our Social Security, actually, from the people, and we're funding domestic child trafficking.
No,
and it stems from all of that.
And your situation, and obviously we all feel for you. So you're attempting right now you're having to battle not only your father, but someone who's famous and has power. So I'm sure whatever kangaroo court system they have involved here, you probably walk in there and you probably realize you don't have much of a chance because John Walsh is considered this upstanding hero. And if he's telling them that you're not a fit mother, I mean, I assume that's what's going on, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's over now. He sold my baby in August right in front of me in a side courtroom deal, backdoor courtroom deal at the courthouse, showed up and ambushed my trial by ambush, and came in with his sheriffs. Now, we have to also acknowledge that the police and law enforcement are a huge part of child trafficking in America. They facilitate it, they allow it, they enable it. They are most all of them are Masons. The Shriners started with collecting fingerprints on our children and different things like that. And so law enforcement is huge on that. John Walsh has groomed an entire nation of law enforcement. If you're a good law enforcement, you idolized this man. You were groomed by him. But also we know of the high levels of corruption, especially today within law enforcement. And wanting to be that or being compromised or working with cartels and mobs, so we have to start asking how does this structure work? How is this working out? We've got John Walsh. And yes, when I go into these courtrooms and everything, I mean, first of all, I was guilty and never had a chance to be proven innocent. Everyone treated me like I was a criminal, although to date, I've never been charged with anything. I was a law-abiding citizen. I've supported law enforcement my entire life. I was known in the community for working with families and children, and my children were so beautiful and loved and bonded. My family had never been thriving more. But yeah, I mean, when you have a man that has groomed an entire country and, with emotional, if you notice, the first thing he says, no matter whether he's at a county commission meeting for the license plate, saying that he loves Scotland Yard and, we should all be like Scotland Yard. The first thing he does is bring up, my son was decapitated and is Adam Walsh, so it's really, we really have to be looking, and I hate it. I hate every bit of it. I'm so mad at him, to be honest. I'm so mad at both of them. But this is bigger than us.
They're keeping you from your kids.
Well, I mean, that's I can't even talk about that part, Don. Yeah, I can't even talk about that part. It is absolute insanity. This is changing my children's lives. He's created this in my life and my children's, and my newborn baby was taken from my bleeding womb at 5 days old. And now I have not seen her in a year. She's sold to a stacked foster home in Fort Pierce, Florida, not a very good place, also a port of Florida, great for trafficking. I mean, and John Walsh did it. So if John Walsh, and no one's doing anything about it, I can't go to the police. I need people to go make these reports. I need people to call and say, John Walsh is committing crimes that need to be investigated. I cannot, because the police have retaliated and come after me. My life and my children's are threatened every day.
Well, the police, believe me, I'm trying to do a show about police corruption. I write about it all the time, but I can't get any of these outfits to come on. They don't answer me. Whether they Project Innocence or the police corruption, I don't know. They don't answer me. But you'd think that as John Walsh, okay, let's hypothetically assume that he's just a concerned, crusading grandfather. He thinks you have trouble, and so you can't raise the kids. So in most of those cases, then the grandparents would raise them. But you're telling me he's farming them out into a system that I don't know how he could trust, but so he's not your parents aren't raising any of your children?
They are. They gave my daughter, my oldest daughter, who was speaking up and was more of the problem in the situation. She takes after her mother, I will say proudly. But she actually was given to her biological father, who came out of nowhere and, filed these affidavits without having ever being able to have known whether any of it was true or not, because it was John Walsh. Actually, the affidavits that they filed, all the details that they accused me of, we actually find all of the allegations against me in some form or another in Adam's case files about my mother and my parents. I was very interested to find out where all these allegations came from. Yes, and they are sleeping. She allows her children to sleep, or her paramour to sleep in bed with her children. Well, actually, that was my mother with James Campbell, and it's noted that Adam would sleep with James in their home, constantly. So things like that, for example. But yeah, to answer the question, he has given my daughter to this biological father who was willing to do this to his own daughter and to participate in these lies without any way to ever know or whether this was valid or not. But again, my daughter comes with an inheritance. Then he kept my two sons and he adopted them for adoption fraud. And you get incentives for that. And there's perks to that, but also the boys, if you notice, he kept. And then my youngest daughter, he, I guess he said, hey, this is an extra one. I've got one too many. You can have it. A state will make this deal. If you go along and let me keep the other ones, I'll give you this baby. So
that's remarkable.
And if he can do all, like I said, if he can do all of this, then what about Adam? Why do we believe that he had nothing to do with Adam if he can be doing all of this? I can't sit with a logical, sane mind. By the way, I've had evaluations and psychiatrists and drug evaluations and everything over the past 3-4 years, twice a week. We've proven everything wrong. That's why they had to come after me.
Now, Meghan, from what
you sound remarkably sane to me.
What you've heard over the years, your parents really didn't have a favorable light when it comes to talking about Adam, right? Do I have that right from last time?
In terms of, what do you mean, a favorable light, Chris?
Like in terms of from what you may have heard throughout the years, that they were kind of passive when it came to talking about caring about Adam. Am I out of line by saying that kind of thing? Like, I think I heard that somewhere before, where they really didn't seem like they cared. I mean, there's no other way to put it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You are correct. And that's another thing that I started having issues with, why I started questioning what I had issues when they would want to take my kids all the time and groom them and do that kind of stuff. But yes, and that's also what is well documented from James Campbell. Again, my father, when it's ironic, when Adam happened, James Campbell was the live-in lover, and my father ended up paying for his attorney. Now, in my case, my daughter's taken, and the biological father comes in to help and aid this fraud, and my dad pays for his lawyer. So just wanted to put that out there. But James Campbell did say, and it seems that the police at first were asking, actually, the right questions. They had James Campbell on deposition saying, what's the relationship between you and Meghan Walsh? What was the household like? And that, again, was another allegation against me, that I had local drug dealers coming in and out of my house. Maybe local families and moms, but not drug dealers. But we know that my parents did. They had local drug dealers coming in and out of their house, and they were doing cocaine and marijuana and around a 6-year-old little boy. And a lot of people were in and out of their home. And even my mother herself would always be, James Campbell actually said that morning, I didn't take Adam for a reason, because I wanted Reve to learn that she couldn't just pawn Adam off on me or anybody, that to go do her, shopping or the gym. The gym was a big thing, showing the vanity. But, that was it. And in the records, they're saying, so he says, well, I wouldn't actually be surprised if Adam ran away, given the domestic, the condition, in the home at the time, and how, the neglect and things that were happening with this little boy.
What happened to this boyfriend? Is he still around?
Don, I think you can answer your own question. Do you think that this guy's around?
Well, I mean, is he still alive? I guess I'm saying.
He's not. I would have hunted. I'm the real man hunter, and I would have hunted him down by now if he was alive. He's not alive.
Do we know what happened to him? Did he die suspiciously? Or
and that's the thing, we don't know.
Younger than your parents, right?
Yes, he's way younger. He was actually friends with my dad's boss's son, which would be a whole other show that we would go into. But actually, on my podcast, I do have a podcast on Saturday nights. You guys should definitely go check out the last one we did. It was on the serial killer narrative and really brought a lot of this full circle and touched on it, not only on serial killers and compromised targeted individuals, but how that extends now even to just our mass society. Are we the fall guys now? So yeah, you can definitely, we go over that kind of stuff, but James was in the house and he took care of Adam and loved him like that's even been a question too, of whether James was really Adam's father or whatnot. But again, that goes into that family stuff and satanic ritual abuse or the finders cult or maps and different things like that, where, my dad met James Campbell, the lover, actually when he was about 12 or 13 years old, around the pool at the Diplomat Hotel. And then next thing we know, he's bringing him to my parents' house. And then James is living with them for 19 years old. They name James Campbell Adam's godfather. They name a 19-year-old the godfather of their child. Then he's living in the house with them. And basically it was that Adam would say that I have two daddies. I don't know any child with a heterosexual couple that says I have two daddies or uses that term. But he said
Heather had two mommies, but yeah, boy.
Yeah. I have two daddies, one that goes to work and one that stays home. And that's actually what James Campbell said when he moved out, that he was sick of being like the house boy, domestic. He would feed Adam, get him up, make sure he brushed his teeth for bed. And that was his part, he said. That was his part in this setup. Everyone had their parts, and each one would have their own way of disciplining Adam, and it's not normal.
Meghan, do you know if your father personally met Michael Aquino at any point in time?
I do not know, but what we do know is that he was working at the he was in the week that Adam disappeared. My father was actually in a $26 million deal for the Paradise Grand Hotel and Casino in the Bahamas, which is Resorts International and All Else CIA and Meyer Lansky. So, through those connections, obviously Aquino would at some point, be in those circles.
Yeah. All right.
For those of you who don't mind, I mean, I'm sure everybody listening to this knows Michael Aquino is an open Satanist. What was he? A colonel in the Air Force? Or
Colonel.
High-ranking officer.
Aquino.
And so the Air Force permitted an open Satanist, and I wrote in history about he had well documented, very credible allegations of child abuse against him.
And he also wrote a manual on psychological warfare that the Army apparently still uses to this day. Mind war.
Yeah. That's very real. I mean, we know like the techniques of non-physical torture. We know different things that they were, studying and practicing. My father's family was originally they had a masonry company in upstate New York, and they actually poured the prison walls. Irish cement company, go figure. They went to go pour the prison walls, and I found out that my grandfather was actually a police. He had status in the police and everything. I believe it was my great grandfather. Excuse me. And my grandfather was a war vet, a bomber pilot. But nonetheless, I digress. They went and poured one of their projects was pouring the prison walls in Auburn, New York, which is Finger Lakes outside of Syracuse. And actually who was there, and I don't know his name, I'm sorry, but it was the original research or developer from Project Paperclip that created the electric chair. And they were invited on a Sunday, nonetheless, to go witness the first execution in the Auburn prison. And that gentleman that created it was actually in attendance. So these aren't low-ranking connections that my father's family actually had originally before, prior.
That's actually not too far from Plattsburgh, New York, where Dawn, as I told you before, it connects right into the Columbine situation with the psychological
well, there's some.
warfare. Yeah.
And what the Finders cult and what this approach to children and teaching them is, it creates those. It creates shooters. It creates broken, split people, sleepers. I mean, depending on how conspiratorial in terms you want to get, or whatever, how deep in military terms, but sleeper agents or super soldiers or shooters, or those patsies, false flag, these oddest tools, and Ted Bundys and Mansons and things like that. So, and that is based in satanic ritual abuse. I mean, that's just translated into psychology. So that's all we're doing here.
Yeah, because I've done a bunch of research in these spree shooters, school shooters, whatever you want to call them, and yeah, they have a lot of the psychological warfare, the torture, which is supposed to split the personality. And most people think it's science fiction, but if you look back in the church committee, right, Don, in like 1975 with the MK Ultra revelations, we don't really know a lot about, because the CIA unfortunately was allowed to kind of get rid of most of their files when it comes to creating a split personality and MK Ultra techniques. So I think Meghan's, you're right on the money when it comes to that stuff. Reverberates to this day. Yeah.
It does, and we're also seeing it in this mental health industry, right? That also adds to those shooters and stuff. How many are on prescription pills or drugs from that, and what is that industry now doing? That's a racket of trafficking in its own right, and a downfall, adding to a modification of society.
Well, you seem remarkably sane to me, Meghan. But I know, as a young guy, I read well, I mean, believe me, with the insanity that's, I mean,
that just sounds funny. You seem like you're on the ball with the sanity thing. It just sounds funny.
No, because she's under the microscope now. And in my opinion, half of America should be in a padded room at this point. So there's lunacy everywhere. But I read Dr. Thomas Szasz. He was a renegade psychologist back. He wrote The Manufacture of Madness, The Myth of Mental Illness, when I was young. And he talked about how once somebody makes an allegation against you, especially someone like powerful as your father, it's really hard for anybody. How do you prove that you're not crazy? I mean, because you're suddenly under, okay, well, am I trembling too much? Did I twitch too much? Do I have a nervous tick? I mean, it's very hard for anybody to do it. But like I say, you especially in today's world, you're saner than almost everybody I've spoken to in a long time. So for what it's worth, but most people would say, might say I'm nuts too. So you have my endorsement for a little.
I have God to give. Tell me. I already did. I have God to give the glory. I would not be here if it wasn't for that. The grace of God is great, and revealing the truth and having eyes to see and ears to hear is a very profound thing. And just doing due diligence. Again, I was raised in this. I was raised in looking at crimes and sleeping with a comforter on. I still do to this day, because I thought it would slow down bullets when someone came to kill us, and death threats and everything, and all that. So for me, to be able to look at this stuff and actually get some answers, or more of some things that resonate with the reality of what might have happened is really encouraging. But the expense that it came at, obviously, I would have never seen coming. I never saw this coming. I never thought my children would be taken from me, never mind sold and trafficked in front of everyone's eyes, never mind no justice, and the fact that it's still going on. But hopefully the more that we talk about these things, and the public comes forward, I get, how can we help every day? People are asking me this. And again, it is about calling and saying, hey, call the FBI, call whatever, and say, John Walsh, we're concerned about this. We want an investigation into what's going on with him and his daughter. We want an investigation to the National Center. We want a reopening of Adam's case. Those are significant things that would actually make a huge impact if we started holding those, and of course the FBI is behind all this. America's Most Wanted is the only show on TV that's been backed by the FBI. So, there is that, but the more eyes on it and the more people speaking up and using their voices, we don't need huge idols. Again, that's not the point. And that's why my issue is also around CPS. I do believe under God, because we need to realize that the only way that we're going to be able to end this and protect our children is by coming together as the people. There's not some savior, here on earth that's going to take care of this. The politicians and everyone that we have in place are part of this.
You're right. And that's I wonder, and it's wonderful you have faith in God, because I tell people, I think that's all we ultimately have. I mean, this is a spiritual battle, and what you're describing, I mean, it's indescribable. It's bad enough that this stuff is going on, but to hide behind false pretenses. And I'm wondering, is you have faith and you're strong with God. Does your dad, your parents, do they go to church? Do they claim that they're faithful or not?
No, my father was raised strict Roman Catholic, and he was an altar boy when Mass was still in Latin. He has a huge issue with God. And my mother, I grew up with her, mad that we would go to Catholic Mass or church of any sort, and she would do all these energy things over us and stuff when we were growing up. So,
Really?
Make of that
Really?
what you will. Yeah. So, they don't. And yeah, it is. It's a kind of a gypsy background. Well, her mother and her background is a whole other thing. That's Nazi Germany and coming over, and showgirls and adoptions involved in there. And so when you put the pair together, again, we've been on for a minute, so I don't want to go down a whole other thing, but that's another interesting avenue, with my parents that also plays out in other ways, amongst these kind of elites or these generational families or generational issues that we have in society, just in general.
Do you think, because my guess is, do you think that you'd be talking to the likes of me and a known thought criminal of renown like me? You would be going down these paths, doing all this research. Do you think if nothing had happened to Adam, if Adam was your older brother and and you grew up that way, do you think that it was that event that triggered everything in you? Do you think that you might have gone on to lead a normie life otherwise, or without that happening, or do you think you would have just, out of curiosity, gone into this on anyway?
Yeah, I get what you're asking. And it's funny, we were just talking about the other day, one of my friends and I, and, I left music and fashion in 2017, 2018, because I wanted a normal life. I wanted my children, I had children then, and I wanted them to, like I said earlier, to have a normal life, not be raised the way that I was, and to be able to have a life of their own, right? Raised and how they want to be. If I wasn't raised in what I was and the way that I was, which again is another show in itself, to get to, the result of someone that's on television like my brother now and installed into the National Center and on television, or, within the fashion and music industry, I swear, Don, I would have been like a school teacher. I just want to on a farm somewhere. That would have been my ideal. And that's what we were starting to do. And then, they took it all. Go ahead.
Well, do you ever wish that that ignorance is bliss, that you didn't know all this stuff, that you felt like most of the world does, that your dad was this big hero and he's altruistic and you were just blissfully unaware, and you'd have your children obviously at that point? Do you ever think that, or are you glad you know the truth?
Of course, I think that, especially given my children's situation now. I think that, to bring someone crazy in. Isaac Cappy at one point said, hey, people have asked, like, would I come out knowing what I do now? And actually, a lot of whistleblowers don't come out because, and I didn't know. I did not. I admit my naivete, or maybe my, I just thought that, it was John Walsh and this would be obvious. But I do think about that, whether I would have come out or not. But I kind of also didn't have a choice at a certain point when I'm just asking questions internally in my family. And then one day I'm ambushed with my children taken by the system that I'm already advocating, against. I was already outing the corruption within CPS and family court. And then they come after me and take my children.
Well, you mentioned Isaac Cappy. Did you? A very interesting guy who ended up jumping off or being pushed off a bridge. Did you talk to him? Did you communicate with him?
I did not. I know that a lot of people correlate. I really didn't know much about him. I didn't know much about Q and all that kind of stuff. I really didn't. I just, again, have been born in this. That's what I'm the daughter of John Walsh. Like, that's what we do, right? So I thought that I was doing stuff that would make my family proud. I was giving them information about other trafficking cases that had to do with the industry, like we're seeing with P. Diddy, with that I had experienced while I was in the industry. I was giving him information about that we've now seen he has now used as blackmail to, he goes to them and says, I know you're trafficking stuff, so you better not come out about, because they're saying, well, we know that you're doing this to your daughter is fraud and what you're doing is fraud. But he says, but wait, I have the information about your trafficking. So now we've got my son in the middle of like this Mexican standoff of blackmail. So, for example, but yeah, I mean, I never thought that it would get to this point. I thought that I was asking questions and things that my parents would be happy and proud of. And now I know why they gave my brother the position in the National Center and not me. I know why I wasn't allowed around certain things and others were. So, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, you guys. Of course, I'm happy that I know the truth, and I don't think that people have actually really thought about the day that this does come out, or that John Walsh is investigated, or any of that. That's a hard thing for me. That's going to be a very, very hard period for me, and a difficult time, because that's confirmation. I mean, I get choked up about it as we speak. But I do still stand by firmly that, he has been committing serious crimes for the past 3 years. He has other children and families that have come forward about being terrorized and trafficked by him and his associates and his organization. I think for the American people and for our future and for our children, if we didn't have to be living in a world where we're afraid of, stranger danger and riding our bikes anymore, I mean, I think that that's a really blessed thing to come out of a horrible situation. I think that we have to be understanding what is being done, whether it really does the things it says, like really protect children or really keep people at bay, and also what these issues are, where the money's going, because what the National Center gets in a time when we're all struggling could be allotted on a local level and have a much higher impact than what we're seeing on a federal level. I mean, children and families, this is a local community issue. It's not a federal to be profited from and controlled aspect of life or issue. These are aspects of life. They're not issues. We all go through things. So,
well, we're running out of time. Chris, any last thoughts for Meghan?
Yeah, Meghan, keep fighting the good fight. And how many episodes of your podcast, if you don't mind me asking, how many episodes are you up to, and how can people find it, and how can they support your efforts and whatnot?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Chris. And this was a pleasure to meet you. And I hope again that we can connect more after. We are on episode 16. We just did. The serial killer was episode 16. And you can find us. Sometimes we skip because we've got families or things come up or events, but we try to do every Saturday night. The last couple of months were a little rocky because I had some things with safety and different issues that I had to kind of, be out of out of sight for a minute, but we're back. And so that's every Saturday night on Rumble. It is a later show. We do 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but you can always watch a rerun. They are up there. We are on all platforms, even like iHeart and different listening platforms as well. But you can find us on Saturday nights, 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Rumble. The channel is called Insight, INSITE, so Insight. And the show is called Reexamined with Meghan Walsh.
Well, Meghan, you're a wealth of information. You're so fascinating, and the time always goes by too quickly. Any other links do you have a website or any other things you want to promote?
Thank you, Don, and this is always a pleasure, guys. We could, I'll come back anytime. We could talk about any avenue we want to, or you guys want to. But thank you for having me first and foremost. And again, thank you everyone that watched for taking the time to do so. I do have Twitter. I try to keep it simple. We have Twitter. Everyone can find me there. Or X. Sorry, guys. Now it's X, right? I guess I'm showing my technical unsavviness, but we have X and or my age, I don't know, one or the other. So anyways, we have X. My handle is Meghan Walsh _. Again, that's Meghan, MEGHAN, Walsh, WALSH _. Also, you can, X has the great search bar up at the top of, everyone's pages. So if you want to, I encourage people, if there's a topic or an individual or something like that you want to know more about, that I cover, use that search bar. Also get involved in comments and asking. We've got a great fan base over there. It's not even fan, it's a family. We've got a great fam base over there. And everyone really has their hearts in these issues. They're bringing great research. We need more researchers. We need more people that can, write documents and reports and things like that, so that we could have things to present in terms of requesting reopenings of cases or different things of that nature. Also, the last thing I want to tell people or inform people about, find on my page, I'll be posting more later, but I have been posting over the last week here and there about a gentleman, by the name of Tanoa Downing, and he actually is on honorable discharge, so he is military, and he is working with us, the people, to go around before June 6th. He is serving the AGs of 40 states. He's going around and doing an amazing job. We will be serving Ken Paxton in Texas coming up on the tentatively scheduled for the 17th. And he is basically going with affidavits and cases. It's a long thing I won't get into. That's more for him to explain, but please, everyone, go check that out. This is about correcting the courts in America, which then does affect all the other aspects, like if you have someone unfairly locked up with the criminal justice system, as well as CPS, and all of the trickle down effect that is enslaving all of us in America under the guise of help or protection or law. So he's fascinating. He's doing great work. We need we need people to get behind him, and you can find that over on my Twitter page as well. Lastly, if you, people in my position need resources. We need prayers first and foremost, but we need resources and we need donations. I do work for the people every day at this, and I show up every day and through the night and more sometimes if I can, if that exists, right, guys? So if you do appreciate what I do and want to support, unfortunately, that's where they hit us. It's financially and resources. And so we do have a Cash App. You can find that on my X page at the top, or you can go to and use the money sign, M Walsh Consulting is my Cash App handle, as well as PayPal. If you use PayPal, it's familyfarmandfaith@gmail.com, and that's all spelled out. So it's family farm and being AND faith, FAITH, at gmail.com. So and really prayers are invaluable. We know this is a spiritual battle, and we know it's just a matter of time before the light overtakes the dark. So the more we can get this word out, the more you can share this information, and in a graceful, cool way. Isn't this fun, guys? Like, you could just say, hey, are you aware? Or did you know about this? Did you think of it in these terms? Or what is CPS these days? There's not anyone in this country that hasn't had a family member or their family or a friend that has had to deal with CPS at this point, or DCF, whatever it's called in your area. And they're only getting more rampant, especially with what John Walsh and the National Center and these people are doing behind closed doors to essentially, my case especially, set precedent and set into law, the fact that they can take your children based on any potential future adverse event that they deem. Okay, so if we listen to that, that is a terrifying and very dangerous precedent to be set and thing to exist against our families and within our government and law against us. So let's start talking and doing. Yeah, I mean, these are children's rights violations more than we focus on the parents, but it's really violating children's rights when they can't even speak for themselves. They have a right to their biological families, and that's who we should be supporting. Our money can go towards helping someone with a substance abuse issue, or follow-up counseling, or a ride to work. That's what our community is supposed to be about. And we need communities that understand the importance of biological families, loving thy neighbor as thyself, and really stepping up and coming together as the people for our children, for our future. That's the only way this will align, and we'll be very beautiful and successful if we can get it together, guys. So thank you again.
Well, you're doing all you can, Megan. You're very courageous, very informative, and very captivating. So it's always a pleasure to have you on. I wish you the best of luck. God bless you. Hopefully you'll get justice someday. And we'll definitely have to have you back on, because you're always a pleasure. Thanks, Chris Graves, always with us. And thanks to everybody in the chat room. So we'll see you next week, same time on I Protest. Take care.